She mistook a millionaire CEO for her taxi driver, but that mistake changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The evening rain had just stopped, leaving New York glistening under 1,000 reflections. Streetlights shimmered on puddles, and the smell of wet asphalt mixed with the faint sweetness of tulips and baby's breath that still clung to her coat. Lila Bloom locked the glass door of Petal and Pine, her tiny flower shop tucked between a laundromat and a bakery that always smelled like burnt sugar. Her fingers were red from wiring stems all day, but she smiled faintly at the sight of her last delivery order handwritten, smudged by a raindrop. Grand Astor Hotel, 7 p.m. Engagement bouquet. Her old umbrella snapped in the wind. Perfect, she muttered, hugging the wrapped bouquet to her chest as she dashed into the street. Cabs flew past, splashing gray water onto the sidewalk. She waved frantically, but no one stopped. Then she spotted a black Mercedes idling at the curb, headlights cutting through the drizzle. Without thinking twice, she yanked open the back door, slid in, and gasped for breath. Grand Astor Hotel, please. As fast as you can. The man in the driver's seat turned his head slowly. His dark hair was still damp. His jaw clean-shaven. His expression unreadable. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, in a calm, deep voice, "You are in quite a hurry." Yes, I am sorry," Lila blurted out, her cheeks burning. "The delivery's already late. And my boss, well, that would be me, is going to fire me if I do not make it on time." He glanced at her through the rearview mirror, amusement flickering behind his gray eyes. "All right then," he said, shifting the gear. "Buckle up." The car eased into the traffic. Raindrops streaked across the windows like tiny rivers. Lila exhaled, pressing the bouquet tighter. "Thank you," she murmured. "You are a lifesaver." He smiled faintly. "That is not what people usually call me." The drive was quiet except for the steady hum of tires and the soft jazz playing through the speakers. Lila studied the reflection of the man's face in the glass, too sharp, too calm for a taxi driver. His hands on the steering wheel looked like they belonged to someone used to commanding boardrooms, not traffic. Still, she was too exhausted to question it. Instead, she filled the silence with her nervous chatter. "You know, people think working with flowers is easy, but it is not. Roses have thorns, lilies stain your clothes, and tulips. They die the second you stop paying attention." He chuckled softly. "Sounds like people." She tilted her head, surprised by the answer, then laughed. "Maybe, except flowers never pretend to be something they are not." The car stopped at the entrance of the Grand Astor. She opened the door quickly. "Thank you again. I owe you one wait." "How much for the ride?" He looked back, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Do not worry about it. Really, that is kind of you. Let us just say it was. On the house." She nodded gratefully, ran toward the hotel doors, and disappeared inside. Adrian Hale watched through the windshield as she vanished into the golden light of the lobby, the bouquet still glowing against her raincoat. The corner of his mouth curved slightly. He leaned back, rain tapping gently against the roof of his car, and whispered to himself, "A flower girl who treats a stranger like a person." He reached to the passenger seat, where she had accidentally left behind a single white rose wrapped in tissue paper. On the tag tied to its stem, in careful handwriting, were 4 words, "Bloom for what you love." And without knowing it, that one forgotten rose had just changed everything. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the cracked blinds of Lila's small apartment above the flower shop. The scent of dried lavender hung in the air, mixed with the faint aroma of stale coffee. She sat on the floor beside a stack of unpaid bills, a pencil tucked behind her ear, sketching new bouquet designs into her worn notebook. The words written on the first page, "Bloom for what you love," seemed to mock her today. Her phone buzzed. Another overdue rent reminder. She sighed, rubbing her temples. The shop had been losing customers for months. Larger franchises offered cheaper flowers, faster deliveries. But Petal and Pine was all she had left of her mother, who used to whisper that every flower had a story. Lila had promised to keep that story alive. even if it meant working until her hands bled. She glanced at the bouquet tag she always kept on the counter, the same kind she had tied to that white rose last night. She wondered if the driver had noticed it, or if it had simply been tossed aside like another forgettable delivery. Across the city, Adrian Hale stood before the glass wall of his corner office on the top floor of Hale Tower. From up there, Manhattan looked like a map, tiny, organized, predictable. Yet the night before had not been predictable at all. He still remembered the way she had burst into his car like a gust of rain and sincerity. He remembered her laugh, soft but nervous, and how she had spoken about flowers, as if they were living things that could feel love. He turned the white rose over in his hands. The petals had wilted slightly, but the words on the tag were still clear. Bloom for what you love. It was not something his board of directors would ever understand. A knock on the door pulled him back to reality. His assistant, Claire, entered briskly. "Sir, the investors' meeting starts in 10 minutes. Tell them to wait," he said calmly, placing the rose on his desk. Claire hesitated, startled. Adrian Hale never kept anyone waiting. Meanwhile, Lila hurried through the drizzle to open her shop. She flicked on the lights, and the soft glow revealed buckets of roses, lilies, and daisies waiting to be arranged. She wrapped her apron around her waist and whispered to herself, "All right, let us make today better." The bell above the door chimed. She looked up, expecting a customer, but saw a man in a dark gray suit standing there, a familiar calmness in his eyes. "You!" she breathed out, her voice almost a whisper. "The driver." Adrian smiled faintly. "That would be one way to describe me. What are you doing here?" He glanced around the small shop, breathing in the scent of fresh peonies. "I thought I should return something." He reached into his coat pocket and carefully placed the wilted white rose on the counter. The tag fluttered slightly in the breeze. "You kept it?" she asked softly. "I did," he said. "It was too honest to throw away." She laughed nervously, brushing her hair behind her ear. "You really did not have to do that. Most people would have tossed it out." "Most people," he replied, "do not know what they are missing." Silence hung between them for a moment, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator that kept the tulips cool. Lila finally cleared her throat. "So, are you here to buy flowers?" "Maybe," he said, his tone unreadable. "Or maybe I just wanted to see the person who made even the rain seem beautiful." Her cheeks flushed. "You are very poetic for a driver." He smiled, not confirming nor denying. "Let us say I have driven through many kinds of storms." Lila chuckled, shaking her head. "Well, if you ever need flowers for your next passenger, I will give you a discount." "Deal," he said, extending his hand. She hesitated, then shook it, her small hand disappearing into his firm grasp. For a brief moment, something unspoken passed between them, a warmth that felt like sunlight breaking through a gray sky. When he left, she stood there for a long time, staring at the rose he had returned. She could not explain it, but something about that man lingered in her mind, like the scent of fresh rain. And for Adrian Hale, driving away from the little flower shop tucked on a quiet corner of the city, that same scent stayed with him, something honest, fragile, and dangerously unforgettable. A week later, Lila's flower shop smelled like heaven and heartbreak. Valentine's season always brought a rush of orders, couples declaring love, apologies wrapped in ribbons, but this year, the rush felt heavier. She had spent every night cutting, trimming, and tying bouquets until her fingers turned raw. Still, the bills piled higher than the roses. That morning, she flipped the open sign and brewed her usual pot of coffee, trying to ignore the dull ache in her chest. The doorbell chimed again. A delivery man entered, carrying a long, rectangular box. "Package for Miss Lila Bloom." "Me?" she asked, surprised. She had not ordered anything. He nodded and left. Lila opened the box carefully. Inside lay a single glass dome containing a preserved white rose, identical to the one she had lost, and beneath it, a folded note written in neat, deliberate handwriting. "Every flower deserves a second chance to bloom. A.H." She stared at the initials, her heart fluttering. Adrian Hale. The driver who was not really a driver. But who was he then? The handwriting was elegant, practiced. Definitely not someone who lived paycheck to paycheck. The bell chimed again. This time, a woman in a navy blazer entered. "Good morning. I am from Hale Foundation," she said politely. "We are organizing a charity gala next week at the Grand Astor. We need floral arrangements for the entire ballroom. Are you available? Lila blinked, stunned. The Grand Astor? Yes. The theme is New Beginnings. Your shop was personally recommended by Mr. Hale. Her breath caught. He recommended me? The woman smiled. He said you understand the language of flowers better than anyone. After she left, Lila stood there in disbelief, clutching the note. It felt unreal. The same man she had mistaken for a cab driver had just given her the biggest opportunity of her career. She pressed her palms to her chest, whispering, "What are you doing, Adrian Hale?" Days passed quickly as she prepared for the gala. The small shop turned into a whirlwind of petals and paper. She barely slept, filling order lists, choosing colors, balancing beauty with budget. Her friend and part-time helper, Mia, watched her work tirelessly. "Lila, this could change everything," Mia said. "A Hale Foundation gala? You will be famous." "Or humiliated," Lila muttered. "What if they realize I do not belong there?" Mia smiled. "You belong anywhere your flowers bloom." The night of the gala arrived. The Grand Astor glittered under crystal chandeliers. Lila stood in the ballroom, adjusting the final centerpiece, a towering arrangement of white roses and baby's breath shaped like a blooming heart. The guests began to arrive in tuxedos and sequined gowns. She stepped aside quietly, content to watch from the corner. Then, the voice of the host echoed across the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and chairman of the Hale Foundation, Mr. Adrian Hale." The room erupted in applause. Lila's smile froze. She turned toward the stage, and there he was, tall, composed, breathtaking in a black suit. The man she thought was her driver now stood beneath the spotlight as one of the most powerful men in New York. Her hands trembled, nearly crushing the ribbon she held. Memories flashed through her mind the night in the car, his calm voice, the way he had looked at her shop, the rose under glass. None of it had been an accident. Adrian's speech flowed with charm and precision. "Every act of kindness," he said, "no matter how small, has the power to change a life. Sometimes, even a stranger's kindness can plant a seed that grows beyond imagination." His eyes scanned the room and stopped on her. For a heartbeat, they simply stared at each other, two worlds colliding in silence. Lila felt her throat tighten. She backed away slowly, slipping through the side door into the quiet hallway. Her reflection stared back from the mirror on the wall-smudged mascara, trembling lips, a girl who had trusted too easily. Outside the ballroom, laughter and music swelled, but in her chest there was only one sound, her heartbeat, steady and broken, all at once. She whispered to herself, "You were never my driver, were you?" And for the first time since her mother's funeral, Lila Bloom felt the sting of tears that smelled like roses and regret. Lila slipped into the service corridor behind the ballroom, her heart racing faster than the music inside. The walls smelled of champagne and dust, the echo of laughter fading behind the heavy doors. She pressed her back against the cool marble, trying to catch her breath. The truth spun around her like confetti she could not clean up. Adrian Hale, the driver who had smiled kindly in the rain, was the same man who now stood under chandeliers, shaking hands with senators and billionaires. Every word he had spoken replayed in her mind, and each one hurt a little more. A voice startled her. "Lila?" She turned, and there he was, no tuxedo under stage lights now, just Adrian, holding a glass of water, his expression uncertain. "You left before the dinner began," he said softly. "I was hoping you would stay." "I should not even be here," she replied, her voice trembling. "You could have told me who you were." "I know," he admitted, "but that night, in the car, you looked at me like I was a person. Not a name, not a title. I did not want to lose that." She shook her head. "You lied, Adrian. You let me believe you were someone else. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" He stepped closer, his tone low and honest. "I did not plan it. I just wanted a few moments of normal. Then you came along, and it felt like breathing for the first time." Her chest tightened. "You could have told me the truth before I walked into this room, full of people who think I am nothing." "Do not say that," he said quickly. "You are not nothing." She smiled bitterly. "Then why do I feel like a fool holding a ribbon while you make speeches about kindness?" The silence that followed was unbearable. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet pouch. "Lila, I did not bring you here to embarrass you. I wanted to show you something." He opened the pouch and revealed a silver pin shaped like a white rose. "The foundation uses this symbol for new beginnings. I thought it was fitting because of you." Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You do not need to fix me with charity." "It is not charity," he said gently. "It is respect." But the words could not erase the sting of being misled. She took a step back, her hands trembling. "I cannot do this. I need to leave. Lila, please." "Oh?" She met his gaze one last time. "You told me flowers are like people, remember? They bloom when someone believes in them. But you never really believed in me. You believed in the version of me that made you feel human." Then she turned and walked away, heels echoing down the marble corridor, the sound sharp as breaking glass. Adrian stood frozen, the silver pin still in his hand. Around him, the noise of the gala resumed: music, laughter, cameras, but it all felt distant. The spotlight that once defined him now felt like a cage. He glanced down at the white rose pin and whispered, "I did not mean to lose you before I even had you." Outside, the night air was cold, carrying the scent of crushed petals from the arrangements she had made. Lila stepped into the street, tears mixing with the rain that had started to fall again. She did not look back, and somewhere high above the city, behind glass walls and privilege, Adrian Hale realized that the only thing wealth could not buy was a second chance at honesty. For the next few weeks, the city moved on, but Lila's world felt stuck somewhere between winter and spring. Her flower shop stayed quiet. The Valentine's rush had faded, leaving behind only empty buckets and the faint smell of wilted stems. She worked in silence, avoiding questions from her friend Mia, avoiding mirrors, avoiding memories of a man whose name was printed on skyscrapers. Each morning, she unlocked the door of petal and pine and whispered the same words her mother used to say, "We bloom again." But the flowers did not bloom as easily as they once had. Customers stopped by less often. Even her hands, once steady, now trembled when she tied ribbons. One afternoon, she was arranging tulips when the bell above the door rang. A delivery boy stood outside, holding a sealed envelope. "For Miss Lila Bloom," he said. Inside was a simple letter, typed on elegant stationery. "Dear Miss Bloom, Hale Foundation would like to commission your shop for a project called Hearts in Bloom, a charity exhibition dedicated to local artists. The gallery will be in the Midtown district next month. You have complete creative freedom. Thank you for reminding us that kindness is an art form. Claire." On behalf of Mr. Adrian Hale. Lila read it twice, unsure whether to laugh or cry. It was just business, she told herself. But the words carried something gentler. Against her better judgment, she accepted. Over the next few weeks, she poured herself into the project. She designed floral sculptures that told stories: roses for courage, daisies for innocence, baby's breath for hope. For the first time since the gala, her shop came alive again. The air filled with color, scent, and the sound of scissors snipping through stems. Late one night, Mia found her asleep at the counter, surrounded by petals. "You have worked yourself to the bone," Mia said softly. Lila smiled faintly. "Maybe that is what it takes to grow something beautiful again." When the day of the exhibition arrived, she dressed simply, wearing a pale blue dress and the silver pin Adrian had once offered her, the one she had nearly thrown away but could not. The Midtown Gallery shimmered under soft light, filled with hundreds of arrangements from local artists, but none drew attention like hers. Her display stood at the center, a giant heart made entirely of white roses, surrounded by glass domes, each holding a single preserved bloom. On every tag were the same 4 words that had once hung from the rose she left in his car: "Bloom for what you love." Guests stopped to take pictures, admiring the quiet poetry of her work. Lila stood in the corner, content just to watch. Then, a familiar voice spoke behind her. "You turned a mistake into a masterpiece." She turned slowly. Adrian stood there, no tuxedo, no cameras, just a man in a gray coat holding a single white rose. Her heart pounded. "You should not be here," she said softly. "Maybe," he replied, "but I had to see the person who taught me that flowers are stronger than pride." For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them was filled with the scent of roses and the weight of things left unsaid. Finally, she whispered, "You hurt me." "I know," he said quietly. "And I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for the chance to earn it." "Oh well." Lila looked at the rose in his hand, then back at her own creation glowing under the lights. For the first time in weeks, she let herself breathe. Outside the gallery windows, New York shimmered in early spring. The city was blooming again, and maybe, just maybe, so was she. After the exhibition, life at Petal and Pine slowly returned to rhythm, but something had changed. The story of the flower girl who decorated the Hale Foundation Gallery spread through the city like spring wind. Orders poured in. Reporters called for interviews. Yet every time someone mentioned Adrian's name, Lila's heart tightened not with anger anymore, but with something quieter, unresolved. Adrian did not contact her again. Weeks passed, then months. The white rose he had given her dried in a small glass vase behind the counter. Fragile, but still beautiful. Sometimes she caught herself staring at it while counting change, wondering if the petals missed the rain as much as she missed the sound of his voice. One gray afternoon, while she was unpacking a shipment of lilies, the doorbell rang. She turned, expecting a customer, but froze. Adrian stood there, tall and careful, his hands empty except for a single folded paper. "May I come in?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Of course. You own half the city anyway." He smiled softly. "Not this place. This one belongs to you." The words landed gently, disarming her. He looked around the shop, the same cramped shelves, the same dusty cash register, but his expression was different this time, quieter, almost reverent. "It smells the same," he said. "Like hope." Lila folded her arms, trying to stay composed. "What do you want, Adrian?" He handed her the paper. "An invitation. Hale Foundation is opening a new community greenhouse in Brooklyn. It will teach children to grow and care for plants. I want Petal and Pine to design it." She unfolded the letter. The logo was embossed, the proposal real. Her fingers trembled slightly. "Why me? You could hire anyone." "Because it started with you," he said simply. "You reminded me that real growth does not happen in glass towers. It happens in small places, in hands like yours." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rain tapped softly against the window. She looked up. "Adrian, I do not know if I can trust you again." "I do not blame you," he said. "I kept my world hidden from you, thinking it would protect something good. But love is not born in the dark. It needs light to grow." His honesty unsettled her. "And what makes you think this, whatever it was, can still grow?" He glanced at the dried rose behind her, its petals curled like folded memories. "Because it is still standing." Lila followed his gaze and felt a lump rise in her throat. She reached out to touch the brittle stem. "You really believe in second chances, do you not?" "I do," he said quietly. "And I believe in you." She looked at him for a long time, seeing not the man from the headlines, but the one who had once driven her through the rain just to help deliver a bouquet. The same calm voice, the same patient eyes. Finally, she exhaled. "All right, Mr. Hale, tell me about this greenhouse." He smiled, not triumphant, just grateful. "It is a place where things that almost died get to bloom again." As he spoke, the afternoon light broke through the clouds and spilled across the shop floor, touching every petal, every leaf, and every part of her that had quietly waited for something honest to return. For the first time in a long time, Lila Bloom did not feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was beginning again. Weeks later, the greenhouse project began to take shape. Every morning, Lila traveled across the Brooklyn Bridge to the construction site, a wide stretch of glass and soil waiting to be filled with color. The Hale Foundation had given her full control of the design, but what truly moved her was that Adrian kept his distance, no pressure, no headlines, no speeches. He simply showed up at sunrise with coffee and gloves, ready to carry soil or plant seeds beside her. At first, they spoke only about logistics, the angle of sunlight, the watering system, the shipment of flower beds. But slowly, conversation drifted into gentler places, favorite scents, childhood memories, the tiny moments that had shaped them. One morning, while she was arranging seedlings in neat rows, Adrian said quietly, "My mother used to keep a single white rose on her desk. She said it reminded her that power meant nothing if you forgot how to nurture." Lila looked up. "She sounds wise." "She was," he said, "and stubborn. She would have liked you." Lila smiled faintly. "I am also stubborn. That is how I survived." He chuckled softly. "Then maybe you are what she hoped I would become." The days passed in a blur of sunlight, laughter, and shared silence. Together, they built something real, a space that breathed life. The community children came to help plant rows of daisies and lavender. Lila taught them how to handle petals gently, explaining that flowers, like people, thrive when treated with care. Adrian watched her, his expression softening each time she smiled. Still, at night, doubt sometimes crept in. Lila would stand in her small kitchen, staring at the letter of agreement pinned to her fridge. Could she truly trust him? Was this partnership only temporary a way for him to ease his guilt? One evening, after everyone had gone home, she stayed behind to finish labeling the plants. Adrian appeared at the entrance, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You are still here," he said. "So are you." He set the cups down on a wooden bench. "You once told me that flowers do not bloom without light. I think people are the same. You gave me light, Lila." "Oh." She looked away, her heart thudding. "You gave me a second chance, but that does not mean I can forget the first mistake." "I do not want you to forget," he said softly. "I just want to prove that this time, I am not hiding behind anything." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver rose pin, the same one she had refused at the gala. This was supposed to symbolize a foundation built on giving, but now, it reminds me that sometimes giving means letting someone see who you really are. He placed it on the table between them. No cameras, no boardroom, no mask, just me. The greenhouse lights reflected in her eyes. She hesitated, then touched the pin. "Maybe it is not about trust," she whispered. "Maybe it is about time." He nodded. "Then I will wait." Outside, the city hummed quietly under the fading sky. Inside, the last rays of sunset turned the greenhouse golden, painting them both in warmth. For the first time, Lila did not feel like she was standing across from a millionaire. She was standing next to a man who was learning how to grow again just like her. And somewhere between the soil and the stars, something fragile and unfinished began to bloom once more. The greenhouse opened to the public on a bright Saturday morning in early summer. Sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling, scattering over rows of fresh blooms that shimmered like jewels. Families wandered between aisles of color, children's laughter echoing off the walls. For Lila, it felt like watching hope take root right in front of her eyes. She stood by the entrance, greeting guests and adjusting a few displays, her hands still streaked with soil, her chest filled with quiet pride. Petal and Pine had its logo on the wall, small but permanent, a promise that her mother's dream had not been forgotten. Adrian moved among the visitors, shaking hands and answering questions. He looked different that day, lighter, freer. But there was still one thing left unspoken between them. As the crowd began to thin, he walked toward her, holding a folded newspaper. "You should see this," he said, offering it to her. On the front page, a headline read, "Local florist turns mistaken encounter into city landmark." Lila read the article silently. It told their story, the rain, the car, the misunderstanding, but in a way that made it sound like fate, not chaos. She looked up at him, torn between laughter and disbelief. "So now the whole city knows?" He shrugged gently. "I tried to stop them, but maybe it was time." "Time for what?" she asked. "For the truth," he said simply. "I am not ashamed of where we met. That night changed me." Her pulse quickened. "Adrian." Before she could finish, a woman from the foundation approached. "Mr. Hale, the board meeting is waiting." He nodded, then turned back to Lila. "Will you stay after the crowd leaves? There is something I want to show you." When the greenhouse finally quieted, she followed him to the far end of the hall where sunlight poured through the glass. There, standing in a shallow pool of light, was a small white bench surrounded by roses. On the backrest, carved neatly into the wood, were 4 familiar words. "Bloom for what you love." Lila covered her mouth, eyes glistening. "You remembered." "I never forgot," he said. "This place started because of those words, because of you." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a tiny velvet box. "You once told me flowers never pretend to be something they are not. I want to be like that with you." Her breath caught. "Adrian, what are you doing?" He dropped to one knee, the sunlight catching the silver band in his hand. "Lila Bloom, will you let me spend the rest of my life learning how to deserve you?" Tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered, "Yes." The crowd outside began to cheer, unaware of the quiet moment blooming inside the glass walls. And as the petals rustled gently in the breeze, the man who once lived behind boardroom glass finally found the kind of wealth that could not be measured in dollars, only in love. A year later, the greenhouse had become more than a project, it was a sanctuary. Every week, children and families came to plant seeds, learn, and laugh. The sign above the entrance now read, "The Bloom Foundation," named by Adrian and Lila together. The world knew it as a story about kindness, but for them, it was a promise that second chances could grow into something lasting. That morning, sunlight spilled across the rows of flowers, and the air smelled of earth and beginnings. Lila stood near the entrance, arranging a bouquet of white roses and baby's breath, the same combination from the night they met. Behind her, Adrian's voice carried gently through the space. "Do you remember the rain that night?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist. She laughed softly. "How could I forget? You were the most expensive taxi driver in New York City." He grinned. "And the worst one. But I would drive through that storm 1,000 times just to find you again." She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the morning light. "You already did. You found me here." On a nearby shelf sat the old tag, framed under glass, the same one that once hung from a single white rose. The words had faded slightly but were still clear. "Bloom for what you love." Lila touched the frame gently. "It all started with this," she whispered. Adrian nodded. "And it will keep starting, as long as we keep believing." Outside, the greenhouse doors opened, and a new group of children ran in, carrying tiny pots and seeds. Lila smiled as she watched them rush to the soil, laughing in sunlight. As the scene filled with color and life, Adrian looked at her and said, "See? Even mistakes can grow into miracles." And she answered, with a voice full of warmth, "Only if you believe in the bloom."